Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is a October 3rd edition of the MSP Initiative, MSP Talk. And if you follow these, and in the beginning, we do some housekeeping and then we get on to the good stuff. So, without further ado, here is that housekeeping. MSPinitiative.com. This is where we park most of the stuff that we do. So, for example, this session is being recorded. Like every other session we've ever recorded, and we park it on our podcatcher on our YouTube page and the sessions tab at MSPinitiative.com. You can download, like, subscribe, forward, all that good stuff. Thank you to everybody that made the journey out last week for MSP Community Minds. That was our second of the year. We are doing these next year, but if you didn't know that we did these, take a look. It was a 2-day, totally educational event with a bunch of MSPs who did panels and workshops who did 2-hour workshops at a time. We love this format. Seems to be very well received. We think that there's some path forward here, and so we're going to be planning some of these for next year. But we love the ability that people were in a sharing mood, and that's how people learn. At least that's the best way I learned. I was not a book guy, but I digress. But that brings us to probably what we're more familiar with. So if you are not living underneath a rock, then you've probably heard of the MSP community block parties. There are 4 between now and the end of the year. So let's go through them real quick so you know what's going on. If in a couple of weeks you're, like 10 days, I think, headed to Germany for PAX 8 Beyond Berlin, super on October 14th, which is, I think, the second night of the conference, we will be holding an MSP block party in Berlin, very beer themed for your Oktoberfest enthusiasts. And it will be jump on a shuttle, take you down the street, 9 to close, and you'll love this place. It is very, again, Oktoberfest themed, very beer-like. You'll love it. Then let's turn back around. Let's go to South Florida. Thank you to Miami, DattoCon Miami on October 29th, which is the second night of DattoCon. We are going to be at the Fontainebleau on site at the famous Live nightclub, literally on property, no shuttle necessary, from 9:30 to close. So definitely register for that one if you're going to DattoCon in Miami. And then we're going to just go a couple hours up the road. We're going to go to Orlando. So on November 6th at 9 p.m., we are bringing you not just cigars, not just bourbon, not just alcohol, not just karaoke, and a lot of networking with 2,000 of your peers. We're bringing you Flow Rider. That's right. You've heard him on the radio with the apple bottom jeans and the boots and the fur, to bring you a private concert for free for the MSP community. So definitely jump on a shuttle on November 6th at 9 p.m. or maybe before, and drive a mile down the road to Icon Park in Orlando, and we will entertain you into the night. And then we go really far away. I'm sure Jen can't wait to fly 24 hours in the opposite direction to Sydney, Australia for DattoCon Sydney on November 12th at 8:30 p.m., second night of the conference, down the street from the conference hotel in Darling Harbour in Australia, where it is summertime in November, not fall. So all that being said, those are the 4 community block parties left for the rest of the year. Head over to MSPinitiative.com, go to community block parties, register ahead of time. It is free if you're an MSP for you to join us. So do that ahead of time so you don't have to do it on site. So there it all is. Then there's some community offers and deals from different companies from around the sandbox. If you can take advantage, awesome. And industry calendar that takes you all the way until the end of the year, until we collect all the other dates for 2025, of which I'm sure there will be something between 300 to 500 of them, and create a new calendar for you so you can know when you don't want to work where you can find yourself. There's all the housekeeping at MSPinitiative.com. And if you don't know how to spell initiative, Google will fix it for you. Now all of that's out of the way, here we are, October, and we bring our guest for today's conversation, Liam from Cyrisma. How are you doing today, my friend?
Hey, not too bad, George. As actuality, it's Cyrisma. So just see.
I'm sure everybody has to get.
But it's funny you say that, George, because when people come to our booth, the first thing we'll say is, "I bet you can't pronounce what that name is," and they'll go Charisma, some other thing. And the funny part is, when somebody said to us one time, "It says it sounds like a drug." And we're just waiting for the FDA side effects to come out, right? So I was like, okay, all right. So, but hey, As long as they
Well,
remember it, that's all I care, right?
hey, listen, you know what? It's one of those things where people will stop and think about it, which gives
Yes,
you a chance to talk to them. So it's not a
exactly,
bad thing.
exactly.
It's like the
Yeah,
hook.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Right.
So anyway, I think this is the first time we've had you on the show.
Yes.
Every time we do this, we like to learn about you a little bit, right? Because
Yep.
everybody's journey through like IT MSP land is
Yep.
like
Yep.
very unique.
Yep.
So tell us about your story, and then I guess that'll take us to present day, which will tell us about your company because you're the guy. You're the guy at the top of this company, the check
Uh,
signer, the founder, right?
the founder, the everybody that blames everything, does everything. No, just no. It's a team effort, but we're proud of where we are. So in actuality, if I go back, so so we say about what's one unique thing about a person, right? Me, I'm originally from a place called the Isle of Man, right, which is a little island between England and Ireland. And one of the famous things it has, if you know, is the Manx TT, which is one of the oldest road races in the world, but also one of the most dangerous road races in the world. It attracts many riders every year. That's where I'm from. But in
Hmm.
actuality, I never thought I'd be in computers or IT. I wanted to be something totally different, going to university, doing all this stuff. And I went back to Ireland, lived with my grandmother, and being Irish as she is, tradition is I was thinking I'd have the summer off. She was saying, you're not going to be lazy. You got to go and work because you got to pay housekeeping money. So for about a couple of weeks, she kept at me, and then I found an opportunity to work at Gateway Computers. Believe it or not, the old Moo
With
TV,
with the cow
with the
box and
cows
stuff.
boxes, the whole 9 yards. Literally 5 minutes from where my grandmother was, and it wasn't due to the fact that I thought, oh, that'd be a good thing to get into. My brain was, ooh, they start at 8. They're 5 minutes away across the. I could stay in bed until like 7:50 and still be on time for work, right?
Wow.
But I go for the interview, and then the rest is history. I actually fell in love with it. To
Hmm.
be honest with you, I fell in love with it. I had actually didn't realize I had a passion for it. Didn't realize it, and fell in love with it. The opportunity to work with computers, not only within the system but also providing support. And the rest is history. When you fast forward, I've literally done only IT as my whole career. I've never. This is not like my second job or third career kind of thing of being in the industry. And I fell in love with cybersecurity along the way. So my first kind of taste of cybersecurity was in 2002, and then I actually applied and got my CISSP in 2005.
Wow.
So back then, and then just kind of progressed on that way. And then if we fast forward to where we are today, um, was an MSP owner, got out of it in 2015, and then
Hmm.
basically 3 years later, saw an opportunity to build Cyrisma. And the reason why we saw that was because within the SMB market space, especially for the MSP community, was that a lot of the solutions they were offering, a lot of people couldn't afford it, right? Because cybersecurity can be expensive, right? Especially if you look at some of the enterprise solutions that try to work in the MSP, it's not cost effective. Weren't really multi-tenant. Wasn't the idea of how do we make people, secure. Then I started building on this ethos of trying to make cybersecurity affordable, accessible, and simplistic. And that was the foundation of building on Cyrisma to allow the MSPs to have more tool set consolidation, right? So they can have total cost of ownership, ROI, and then they build on that to build out additional net new margin for themselves, not only within their current customers, but also prospecting and opening up other areas of revenue. And that was the foundation of Cyrisma. And we use it as an ecosystem now to build on that to do data classification, vulnerability management, secure configuration, GRC, all rolled into one platform for not only other clients to log in, but the MSP to be able to look at saying, hey, I could theoretically pay X for Cyrisma, but I can, on the other end, turn that into 3X, 4X in revenue generation if they work out the process or the kinks in their process, because they always focus on the availability. And cybersecurity is kind of being an afterthought, but it's been a natural progression to move into cybersecurity more than it is to focus on the availability of systems because it's a
Hmm.
requirement for business.
Okay, let's rewind. There's a lot there. Let's
Let's
rewind.
unpack, right?
No, it's good. It's good. I asked the question, and by the
Yeah.
way, I just love learning. Like, it's like everybody takes this up this crazy path to get to
Yeah.
this. So Gateway Computers, you were in the heyday then. Like,
Yeah. Literally in the
I
heyday.
mean,
Literally in the heyday.
like
And it was, yeah.
ma- Gateway Computers, America Online was like popular at the time.
Yeah. Yep.
Like this is the
Yep.
time period that we're
Yep.
talking about.
Yeah. Absolutely. And he
I mean, like,
came
can we call it the dot com era? Like
pretty
it,
much the .com era. .com era, and it was an amazing time because it got to show you how you go to a store and buy a computer of how it's built from start to finish, right? The order being placed, whether it's from a company or an individual person, and going through the assembly line, and then providing the support for it. I'll tell you so many stories of being in support of what people did back then, of what things were. Prime example was we got a phone call from a person that said that his coffee cup holder was broken.
I've heard this one before.
Yeah, and this and like, okay, and my sister goes, yes, this. I press the button, it comes out. I put my coffee cup in it, and then it goes back inside again, and coffee goes everywhere. My keyboard is not working, and we try to explain to him that is a CD-ROM. He didn't know what that was. Second one, and this is for my friend, and he was in support for another company, and it came up on the computer saying that there was not enough virtual memory. Okay, ran out of virtual memory, and it says please close all windows, right, that you're not using. So he said, reiterated it. He had a little bit of silence, and then all he heard was the person literally got it from their computer and closed the windows. Came back and said, I've done that, and I still have the same error message. This surprise, I've got a lot more. It's kind of funny, and I still have some of them written down and stuff like that back in the day of things that we encountered with people at the time when computers were becoming more and more popular, especially for home use.
Wow. I mean, so it sounds like you did a couple things at Gateway through your journey. Like answering the phone was one of them. That like you guys must have had the water cooler of all water coolers.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah. And then
I mean, it could have been like a series of just comedy skits.
Oh, really? Seriously, it's funny. And we talked to friends and so forth that worked in other areas with tech support, and there's so many similarities. We've become more in tune with computers, so we kind of know what everything is. But back then, like even when I went for my second job for at an accountancy firm, they were doing training on people that were old, utilizing the old dissertation systems with the feet on the pedals back and forth for typing up, their recordings and so forth. That they were getting taught how to use a mouse. This is back in the day. You're thinking how to use. You'd be surprised of how many people took the mouse, put it on the floor, and still thought it was a dissertation thing, and trying to click at it with their feet.
Yeah, you know that show IT Crowd. The one where the guy's like, "Hello, computer."
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Yep. Okay, that's what it reminds me of. Or I still joke about this today. Hello, fire department. I have a fire. Please send. And he's emailing the fire department. And I'm just I actually asked this question last week, and I was like, who is texting 911? Like you can, like if you're in the US and you're in a major metro, you can text 911. But I'm calling 911.
Exactly. If you
I don't
time to text,
what this adversity is to like talking to someone.
I know.
By the way, guys, like no offense, they call this a phone. Like you can talk to people.
All right.
No, they just like it's actually a computer and a phone.
Yeah.
And the phone.
Well, think about it. It's like we go in circles, right? You think about back in the early 90s, late 80s, pagers were the thing. That's pretty much what we've gone back to with a lot of the younger generation is texting is basically paging back in the day instead of being numbers for certain things that like 1, 2, 3 is I love you kind of thing. But 911 is the whatever. But the whole point is then you get the pages with the actual keyboard on it. That's where we're at right now is back and forth and paging that they forget how to interact with people.
Did you watch the BlackBerry movie?
No, I did not. No,
Go and watch it.
Okay.
Go and watch it.
Okay.
And then send me a message. You're going to love it.
Okay.
Like they tell you how they've smashed the first BlackBerry together and like how they like ripped the keyboard off from like another thing. And I was like, interesting. And I was like, really just like light bulb went off. But anyway.
Yeah.
And so you had an MSP then.
Yep.
Like, is this MSP based in Ireland or?
No, in the US.
Okay.
US here.
All right. So you had an MSP where? Where was it based?
Rochester, New York. Okay. So I actually am. Well, it depends on where you live. If you hear these say we're not upstate, we're Western New York. So that's the thing. But everybody else says it's upstate, right? So, but yeah,
it's not New York City.
Yes, it's not New York City. Yeah,
okay. Which by the way, I'm not that far. I mean, are you still in New York?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
So I'm in suburban Philadelphia, right?
Okay.
So like I can go this way or I can go this way, but like if
Yeah.
I need to get to a bridge or a tunnel, which I
Yeah.
avoid like the plague, and I'll
Yeah.
tell you why. I'm sure you already know, but like, I can if I hit the highway at the right time at 5 o'clock in the morning, where like I'm not sitting in traffic, I could get to a bridge or a tunnel in like an hour and 20 minutes, hour 50 minutes.
Yeah.
But on every other time of day, that's a half a day operation
Oh
because
yeah.
that's it.
Big time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And like it was funny, I had a guy come in from the UK because it was Liverpool and Arsenal were having a game in Philadelphia at the stadium here for the Eagles. And I was like,
Yep.
oh, well, we got tickets. Come on over. And he actually did. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. He's like, oh, I'm coming into JFK. I have, how much should I have on the Easy Pass? And I was like, $100. He's like, for what? I'm like, because once you go through one round of bridge and tunnels, you're going to blow through your Easy.
Yeah, right.
He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like you got to go through two things to get out of JFK to get
Yeah.
like into New Jersey.
Yeah.
Like it's like $25 a pop, and then by the time you're done, you're halfway through your Easy Pass. He's
Yeah.
like, this is ridiculous, and I'm like, hey man, I don't want to hear it. You have like that congestion zone in London.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
You have your own problems, okay?
Yeah, right. Yep.
So anyway, I try and avoid the bridge and the tunnel. I've only flown out of JFK one time in the last 10 years. And it was because my colleague, who is Mr. Delta, okay? He has like Delta and all their partner airlines. We were going to the Enable conference last year in Prague. And we had never been to Prague. And so it was like 16 hours. It was like 3 hours to get to JFK. Horrible. And then JFK to London, take a train to the other airport in London, London City to Amsterdam, Amsterdam to Prague.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, dude, where did you? He's like, hey, he's like, it was the right price. I don't want to hear it. I'm like, okay, Mr. Bell, fine.
It's funny you say that, George, because it's kind of like Rochester's the same way. There's no direct flights. It's always a connecting flight to everything. But the funny part is that everybody say you're from New York, they automatically assume New York City. I was just saying this to Jen before. People think they don't realize. They're like, oh, are you a suburb of like New York City? Like, no, we're actually closer to Toronto and Niagara Falls than we are to New York City, and it blows their mind. But then when we want to go and take a flight, we have to. If I want to go to Austin, I have to go through like Chicago or Philadelphia or somewhere else, and that's 16 hours just to get local.
So
right?
For me, I and maybe, and me and Jen, we may be at odds about the best airport in the world, but if I'm either going Newark or Philly, I can get a direct flight anywhere. I don't have to do this multi-flight.
Oh, thing. Rub it in, why don't you?
like all of a sudden, for a while, American, bought U.S. Airways. U.S. Airways had a hub in Philly. And then they for like 6 or 8 months, they like took all the direct flights out of Philly, and I was like, okay, I'll just go a little bit further down the road to Newark. It's one highway and no toll.
Yeah.
I pay $1.25 to come back. All good.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, all the direct flights came back to Philly, and I was like, oh, easy peasy. We're gonna go back over here.
Yeah.
So if it's not,
and you save that $1.20.
So
it's the time and effort. Yeah.
Lucky me. But ask Jen about her parking woes. She may have a different story for you. But anyway, parking. That being said, so you had an MSP outside of New York City. And let me ask you a question about that for a second. Why is it that anytime I'm on the phone, I'm sorry if I don't, if you listen to this, you take offense. Don't, because you know what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. Why are they always hard to deal with? Why are all the people from New York that are in the IT business always like, I expect a problem? Why?
Yeah. I don't know. I think they grew up with issues, so they always expect it. So
I tell my team, I'm like, listen, if they're coming from New York, expect that there's gonna be a thing. If you can't deal with that, just pass that off to me. I'll take that.
Yeah, right. I'll be honest with you. For me, I saw it a little differently because I saw an opportunity for us to kind of talk to them about issues, and not rather than saying we are an issue, right? And that's the thing. We saw that as we grew to a team, but at the same time, we didn't
handle the. I'm trying to put this in a way that isn't like totally flip, but how do you handle the New York City-ish mentality where it's like everything's a negotiation? It's every penny you know, it like they'll literally fight you on the corner for it, and I don't want to pay for anything because I feel like that's still the status quo here.
Right? We made a decision in the company not to take any business from it, and not to take companies on from New York City.
There it is.
Yeah.
So it's
So
it was suburban New York.
New York and 10 other states that we were working with. And then from that, New York City. But you're right, it's all negotiation. Right. The negotiation was, how much can I get the price lower? Right.
It's
And
like, hey,
what can
you
you
like
offer me?
you like two cans in the string? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, yeah. So we just made the decision not to do that, and we focused on specific key areas at the time: healthcare and finance. All right, so and you'll see a lot of them moving out of New York City and at different areas, and so we were able to take on that role and responsibility. And then it kind of opened up because we kind of at that time decided to say where we're going to do is a little bit differentiator is more engaging cybersecurity at that point in 2015 and bringing it in. So we built a cybersecurity practice as well to go and do assessments and build that in and merge that onto the MSP side, which gives a little bit of differentiator on the other side, which means we weren't as cheap as some of the other MSPs because we had that kind of thing. And then basically at that point we got acquired, and then from there, I kind of went back into corporate, and that's when I started seeing things because people knocked on my door, says, "Hey, are you able to do consulting again, Liam? Can you do it on nights and weekends?" So I did, and then that's what started the whole process. Thinking, hang on a second, I'm seeing an opportunity here that we can build a platform, and then move into, and then we started in 2018 building the.
Well, hold on, timeout. Did you sell your MSP?
Yeah.
Tell us about that for 10 seconds. Because
What
like
the
everybody has like this idea of how that goes. Like, did you have multiple bidders? Did somebody come knock on your door? Like, when did
it was somebody come knocking on our door, and then at that point, with the knocking on the door, it just basically allowed for an opportunity. And I think we were at a point where we're like, okay, it's time to work on something different. And
Sure.
then we
So
took
when
it.
you
Took
sold, how many employees, how many customers were you supporting, and how many
Mhm.
computers were under management?
At that, I wasn't involved in that side of that. I was
Sure.
the cybersecurity focus.
Okay.
So on the MSP side, on the security side, we had probably roughly at about 7 people working on the MSP on the cybersecurity side, and there was like 13 working on the MSP side.
Okay.
And at that point, we had close to, I think it was like 200 or 300 customers, maybe 30 or 40,000 under management, and then that got merged into another company. And then for us, we took advantage of that, and I decided to kind of burn out after a while because you constantly kind of doing something and being on the road. So it was an opportunity for us to say, hey, how about if we merge into a full cybersecurity focus? And that's kind of what I did on nights and weekends because customers came back and said, hey, I'd like you to be able to do this, and this. And then 3 years later after that, I started Cyrisma.
Okay. Well, as most great companies in the sandbox, right? And then like we
Hmm.
said, there's enterprise companies and
Yep.
big red tape companies split
Yep.
off, whatever.
Yep.
Like the really good companies started in MSP land and they came up with
Hmm.
an idea and they're like, why isn't this out there? And they built
Hmm.
something, right? So
Yep.
like this
Yep.
is that story here, right?
Yep. Yep.
So let me ask you this.
Hmm.
And I know this question has probably come to you 8 different flavors and ways, but I'm gonna ask any. How much of cybersecurity is legitimate and how much of cybersecurity is just I'm selling you a box of goods because it sounds good and it scares you enough that you're going to take out your credit card?
Well, one of the things is that you can't sell on fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That turns people away. That's part of the problem of why we are in this situation. Cybersecurity becomes more expensive. The bad actors are everything. So for a lot of it is that we want to focus on in cybersecurity is to kind of focus for you, George, to say, okay, I need to be compliant. Say you're a financial institution, or even now we'll just say a car dealership, which a lot of MSPs work with. They're getting classed as a financial institution, which
Mhm.
means they're no longer focusing on availability, generating revenue. They now have to say, as I collect that data, what am I going to do with it? They don't have the staff, so they're going to look towards the MSP, and the MSP is going to go, I'm focusing on the availability of the systems to make sure you're up and running, generating that revenue to keep paying your bills. Now I got to start thinking about security. What is the requirement?
Until CDK, which very much, by the way, since you brought up car dealerships, kind of mimics MSP land, right? There's like
Yeah.
3 or 4 big companies.
Yep.
One, they're all PE back now,
Yep.
and the
Yep.
one big guy had the one big breach. Sound
Yeah.
familiar?
Yeah.
Sounds to me.
Yeah.
So, like, what happens when 15,000 car dealerships are down and all of them had all their data in the one place because it was the big guy who was housing all the information, and now all of those credit card numbers and social security numbers and finance applications and credit scores and all the other stuff that the car dealership, to your point, they're acting like a financial institution because
Mhm.
now they're housing all this information.
Yep.
Now what?
It's right, and the problem is that it's about let's the question is complacency, right? You take into a situation like that, they're at a point where they're funneled through four major companies. They have no one else to come and pick from. It's the same thing on cybersecurity. You think about it, you got your Tenable's, your Rapid7s, your Qualyses. They focus on that. Then when they look at other alternative solutions, that's where Cyrisma comes in. But what we have to compete with is complacency. Well, complacency is in their personal life, they get compromised on a daily basis, right? Banks getting this, credit monitoring. So we become basically we don't go, oh my goodness, the sky is falling, right? We got it now. It's at a point where it's like, okay, we got to can't do the fear, uncertainty, and doubt anymore. We can't tell them that, hey, the sky is falling, because yesterday they just got a letter in the mail saying their healthcare got compromised or this got compromised. They're getting a new credit card, so they can't do that. So what's now? It's basically saying, hey, when are you could potentially lose business because George, your vendor is now doing a vendor risk management against you. Are you doing policies and procedures in place? Are you doing this? Because if you're not, we can't award you the contract. We can't award you the business. Now with MSPs, it's a little different because now the fear is for them is that if they don't provide a service or meet their SLA and there is a breach or compromise, they can now be included in a class action lawsuit and a suit for them to be included. And it's actually happened. It's already started. CISA's already recommended that MSPs need to make sure that they cover themselves in every aspect when it comes to cybersecurity. If they say that in their SLA, they need to follow through on it, which means what are you doing? We're going to do patch management. Well, how do you know you're doing patch management? Making sure you do vulnerability management. So it all ties into certain things. CISA saying you need to do this, but from a customer perspective, they need to meet a requirement. Like if it's for example, the car dealerships, they have to be compliant around the safeguard rule of FTC, which is an extension of GLBA, which is what banks and other financial institutions have to do, which means tactically, I have to do vulnerability management or risk based vulnerability management. I have to do a pen test on a regular basis. I have to make sure I have secure configurations in place because that's a requirement, or system hardening, as they like to say in the compliance with policy process. I need to make sure that I know where my data is from a data sensitivity and classification standpoint so I can manage it and maintain it. But then how do I then bring that up to a level of a security scorecard that I can be present to the executive leadership? Because they don't need to know all the ones and zeros. They need to know is, oh, here we are here, and how do we get to here? And that's where the plan needs to be built, and that's when solutions
Wow.
like Cyrisma needs to come to
Well,
play.
hold on. I'll give you an example of this. Microsoft came out with security score. No, but I've never seen anybody get to 100.
No, because you're never going to get to 100, right? Because the only reason being is because it's going to be they're going to say here's like say let's take a compliance example. We'll just use CIS, right? CIS controls version 8. There's over 60 plus 100 plus questions, right? You're not going to answer every single one because there's going to be ones that you're going to mark as not applicable because either you're saying it doesn't require to us or we have a compensating control because we can't physically implement it. So in other words, it means that you're still not doing it. It's the same thing when you go to Microsoft Secure Score. All the different configurations, whether it's data, whether it's app, whether it's identity, all those different things you need to know, but you need to break it down by saying, do I need to do this? Yes or no. If you turn everything on, you can impact productivity, right? So that's the key thing. Security comes with an impact on productivity and also an impact on culture. There needs to be a combination of both where you need to understand what you can do and what you can't do. It's not going to impact productivity, but it's not also not going to reduce your risk.
Okay, let's rewind for 10 seconds.
Yep.
I'm starting to get the feeling based on our conversation that are you implying that an MSP needs to be very, careful on what end customers and the industries that they exist in that they're supporting and that they can't be a generalist anymore? Because it sounds like in order to deal with I was talking to a guy in Australia a month ago, and he's like, there's not a government recommended, they're like CIS is a US government, thing. I guess it could be applied worldwide, but like down there, they're like, the accepted thing is like ISO 27001, right? Like if you can get to that, that is the current go-to because there isn't a recommended one.
Well, so let's take it back for you talk about Australia.
Yeah.
So there's a tactical one that's called Essential 8, right? So Essential 8 is tactical by saying, here's what we want you to do, which is make sure
Which
you
is a
identify
government thing, right?
government thing. And that basically for the MSPs, they need to look at implementing that tactically, which means locking down macro, system hardening, vulnerability, patching. But when it looks at the strategic aspect of it, which means education around the users, policies, and procedures, there isn't one for that. There is other areas that you can adopt and incorporate to maintain that you're increasing the security posture of that. But then when you go to like Europe, they have NIS2, right? Then UK has the Cyber Essentials, which goes in the tactical aspect because they know tactically a lot of things are very weak. Because back in the day in the MSPs, it was their security mindset was as long as they have a firewall, have antivirus, and I do regular patching. Well, I try to do patching. I'm good. Everything else is around that wasn't really thought of, right? Now it's a big different situation. So these are things that they have to abide by. But reality wise,
what's the like? I understand CIS is a guideline, but like, is it SOC 2? Is it like
so it depends on the industry, right? So let's take, for example, if you're in healthcare, you've got a federally regulated security guideline to follow. That's HIPAA. Okay. If you're in banking, you've got FTC, you've got FISMA, you got all these different things that are out there from a federal regulation. Then you got state level, which is agnostic. And state level is making sure that you're protecting PII information on any resident of that state. And each state is different. One's more severe than the rest, right? So you pick one that you're working with and you're in to be able to provide that. And then you go from that and you're able to manage it. Now, the problem you have is then you're kind of feeling like you're all over the place because you got all these regulations that come into play. So it's basically stating that, okay, I want to abide by a situation where I'm going to pick, and you talk about generalist, right? The generalist or somebody that's very well adversed in cybersecurity will pick and say, okay, we're going to standardize on a specific framework and then crosswalk it. So let's say, for example, if I pick CIS controls version 8 or 8.1 now, they've already done the crosswalk for you. So if a customer is in HIPAA or this, they've crosswalked what controls they have and tell you that there's still 10% left to do. But if you follow CIS controls version 8, you can get to about 80 to 90% of potentially majority of the regulations out there and just focusing on one standard. And that's where it comes into play. But the other aspect of it is it's not one size fits all. So we get it a lot where we're saying around, like, say, secure configuration. Well, I want to push it down a secure configuration that does all my customers the same standard. You can't do that because each customer is a little different in what they do, that you have to take that into consideration by saying, yes, you can have a standard group setting, but you can't apply what you've done over in a doctor's office into a lawyer's office. You can't apply the same configuration because they're going to be different, because how their productivity may be different from a doctor's office or vice versa from a security standpoint. So there is a situation where you have to be actually aware and understand and sit down. And that's why we educate. Back in the day, I was educating people called creating the security organization for any company that you're in and be a part of it. Because once you start bringing in different areas of business or different areas of departments, you're able to understand how they work so you can help to build out the security posture. And you've heard the statement that security is not a product, it's a process. It's a combination of both, right? You can institute product, i.e. like Cyrisma, that can help you with process because you can take tactical and turn it into strategic, right? And with strategic means policies and procedures, additional education, doing tabletop sessions, all this kind of stuff that's available to you. And that's the key thing. It's about being educated around cybersecurity, but not educated in a specific product. Because a product itself is great, it can only take you so far, but you need to understand cybersecurity to be able to help the customer and listen to their needs to be able to come up with a formulated plan, that combination of both product as well as process.
Okay. I mean, at the end of the day, here's the reality. If I walk into any business in America that's not a technology business, which is the majority, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's a donut shop, mechanic shop, doctor's office, accountant, lawyer, I could go on, architect, realtor.
Yep.
I mean, they don't give a crap about security.
Hmm.
Like, quite frankly, they all look at it as a roadblock to get them to be able to do what they actually need to do.
Correct.
At the end of the day, like, I didn't come up with this, but I've heard it 1,000 times. Like, technology is one of like the top four most hated industries in our at least in the United States, right?
Hmm.
Between lawyers, mechanics, like you're just talking a language that they don't understand, and
Yeah.
anytime a dollar amount comes along with something they don't
Hmm.
understand, they get frustrated.
Hmm. Yes.
Okay? So, like, at the end of the day, the MSP has gotten pushed into almost an impossible corner. One,
Yes.
they got to keep the lights on, and they get in trouble when the lights go out, and it's not even their fault. They're
Hmm.
just managing whoever and whatever that problem is. And then number two, they're getting squeezed, to your point, CISA, which is a government agency. They're like, well, the MSP is bad, bad,
Yep.
bad. Keep on
Yep.
saying bad things. And it's like, well, if the MSP doesn't there, the customer that they're servicing is just completely, they
Hmm.
might as well be on the island with Gilligan. They're lost.
Yeah.
They're nowhere.
Exactly.
So, like,
Exactly.
you can blame us, you can blame
Yep.
them. The problem didn't go
Yep.
away.
Yep.
So, like, and then of course the MSP is always being, back to your New York City thing, always
Yep.
being squeezed for money, right? It's like, well, you're asking us to do more and more and more, but you're
Yep.
asking us to pay less, less, less. These
Yep.
two things don't work, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
so your platform that obviously you started out of an MSP, so you understand the challenge, right? You
Yep.
understand that problem.
Yep.
Your platform, when you go to an MSP and say, "Hey, I know you could buy like 45 different things here,"
Yep.
right? Like you
Yep.
probably heard,
Hmm.
not one size fits all, and there's going to be a
Hmm.
overlapping of products required on top of process, on top of all the other things you just talked about.
Yep.
But like at the end of the day, the average MSP is not big.
No, they're not.
An average MSP does not have a you working for them.
Correct.
Like,
Correct.
you guys had an MSP and you had a security department.
Hmm.
Most MSPs, that security department don't exist.
Exactly.
There, if best case scenario, it's outsourcing to somebody else.
Correct. Absolutely.
And like,
And
by
it,
the way, everybody's worst nightmare was a theory until about 3 months ago when CrowdStrike took them all out.
yeah. Yeah.
And then every MSP who outsourced to the Yankees or they claim to be the big guy on the top of the food chain,
Hmm.
now they had to go put the fire out, and they introduced that vendor to their customer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now we all, so now they got burned on both sides again.
Correct.
When does it come back down to earth and settle down for the MSP? I feel like they just keep on getting squeezed here.
They do get honestly they do because it's a dog eat dog world out there, right? And everybody thinks that they understand cybersecurity. Now, what I tell people to do is to say that okay, use the resources you have because a lot of them understand security but don't have the means to be in security on a day to day basis because their focus is primarily maintaining systems up, right? But they want to get into the confidentiality, the integrity of systems or networks and so forth. Now, within our tool set, you talked about how do you get customers to start realizing, how do we make them think about how to move from point A to point B? It's basically showing the platform to internal users, i.e., to the MSP themselves, and saying, okay, how do we turn this into a revenue generation so we can earn more money not only from the customer, from existing customer, from a new customers? What differentiates us from one MSP to the next? How do we turn our staff into being not only IT people, but IT/security people, right? But how do we talk to when we go into our QBRs? How do we talk to the leadership and saying, "Here's what we've instituted for you"? Now, there's three things that we've done in the platform that helps them to do that. Number one, we simplified that you're not a credit score, you're not a high risk. We turned it into a grade, so they know F through to A. A is doing great, F means failing, everything in between is a process improvement. Next thing they ask is, what's our financial loss if we were compromised by ransomware? What's the potential dollar amount? Now you're providing that to them. That's an easy sell. We already do the math. You're now presenting, saying, hey, by the way, here's what your potential loss is. Here's how we can offset that to cyber insurance. And oh, by the way, Mr. MSP, in that little questionnaire that we created for you, you can now uplift to the customer net new functions or services that they didn't have before because you're turning that no, which could be also from a certain insurance standpoint be classed as negligence because if it gets compromised, you're turning that into additional services for yourself. The final thing that we put in there for them is, well, how do we compare to other people in our industry? That's a question that we got a lot until we put it in place. Now they can go in and they don't need to be security experts. Those three things right there, the rest is all gravy if you think about it. Presenting those three things to the customer already sets you apart from the rest of the other MSPs that don't have that. They've got multiple tools, or they have to do an Excel spreadsheet. It's directly right there. And now you can present to the customer. You're not having to kind of scramble on a quarterly basis to build out a report and spend hours and hours and hours in doing it. You can walk right into the customer and bring the dashboard up, and right there, right away, see your grade, see what your financial impact is, and show them how they compare to other people in their industry. And oh, by the way, as the MSP, click, here's my action plan for you in near real time of what I want to institute.
Hmm.
And at that point, they look like stellar experts, but they don't have to have somebody come in, click on the thing, and be this expert. The application provides that to them, and then all they need to do then is just execute. And until the next QBR, they see the grades going down, which means you're enhancing your patch management. You're showing them. Now we do get the opposite side of things, where you get MSPs that thought they were doing patching, and the vulnerability says you're really not. They're like, oh my goodness, we then educate them and says, hey, it's not, don't create your own fear of losing the customer, because that's going to make you nervous and make you to make it a wrong decision because you're knee jerking at that point. The other element of it is to say, hey, when we analyzed this new tool, we discovered that we're meeting the SLA because we're patching all the Windows patches. All the vulnerabilities that we're identifying right now are all third party, which means our RMM tool, whatever we're using, is not doing a stellar job at identifying those potential issues. That's why we incorporated Cyrisma, because we need to have more visibility on third party vulnerabilities so we can actually patch, because Cyrisma is telling us that we're doing a great job on Windows patching, which is part of our SLA agreement. On the third party, we're not doing so great. That's
Hmm.
why we instituted Cyrisma, so it elevates our accountability, but also brings you attention to where we didn't have that visibility before. So now you turn that negative into a positive, and the customer goes, "Wow, that's why I'm paying you this money." Because you don't want them to go through an audit every year and say, "Why am I paying the MSP this money and I'm not seeing any value?" That's a key thing right there, that you're willing to accept certain responsibilities, but at the same time, the platform means that they need to have some level of accountability, because it's not all one sided, right? You talked about before about the art of the deal is, I want to use your product, you're going to do everything. We will only can do everything to a certain point, but there is expectations that you need to do things. And what Cyrisma does is allows you to elevate certain things to mitigation to the customer side to mitigate, and then the customer comes back to the QBR and says, "Why is our grade not moving?" Hang on a second, Mr. Customer. I've assigned this three, four things to four of your employees, and they haven't configured it yet. That is why the grade hasn't moved. So now, if anything happens, you've got evidence to say we assigned it, they were aware of it, they didn't execute on it, they can't come after us.
I like that.
So there's there's ways of doing the actual integration and showing that, and that's where MSPs can become subject matter experts over time by allowing you to leverage tools like Cyrisma to allow your staff to become more aware of what's going on and not be fearful of the unknown. Right? We're all fearful if we don't see something. It's like that's why horror movies became so suspenseful, because they knew that our natural fear of not knowing or seeing something enhances that kind of like, oh, and that's what it feels like sometimes with cybersecurity, because they feel that if I show them, I could lose the business or lose my job. No, embrace it, because then if you do that, you can only fix an issue before it becomes a major problem.
Yeah, proactive versus reactive. I got you.
Correct.
So how does the program work, right? Like, do you just work with MSPs? Are you also working with end customers? How does the program structured? Is it per customer? Is it per user? Is it per endpoint? Like, paint the picture.
Yeah. So with the picture itself, we work with MSPs, MSSPs, IR firms, cybersecurity consultancy firms, anybody that works within cybersecurity that has the ability for multi-tenancy, right? So our pricing is, this example is that it's all based on endpoints. An endpoint is a laptop, desktop, and server. It's not a per customer. You subscribe, say for example, you have an MSP that has 1,500 endpoints under management. That's laptop, desktop, and servers. They could have a lot more infrastructure like printers, switches, routers, and all that kind of stuff. We do not include those into the pricing. That's automatically free to you to scan and manage. Why should you be dinged on that? But so therefore, you can manage your licensing a lot more effectively. So that's how we do it. So when you license and says, "Oh, by the way, I want to start off at 250 endpoints," that 250 endpoints can be across all your customers. Then at that point, anything above that is all based on what we call consumption. You can ebb and flow as you lose a customer, gain a customer. Now, one of the de facto things that we also do is give you a consulting license in with being a managed service. So what that means is if you go out and all of a sudden you got this whale that could be 10,000 endpoints like a healthcare institution, right? You're thinking to yourself, do I have to buy more licenses? No, you can still go out and perform the full on assessment for up to 35 days. You're getting a full figure because the goal is you want to turn them into a managed service. Or you're doing the assessment to get paid for it. And within 35 days, just shut down the instance. You don't have to worry about any additional licensing. And what that does is allows you to then basically do POCs with prospective customers, to enhance your assessment capability, or even start a new practice to do cybersecurity assessments with Cyrisma, aiding you to do that as part of that. So you can gain, again, additional revenue generation streams that you want to be able to produce. So that's how we do it from an endpoint standpoint, from the
So
license.
there's an agent that gets installed to do all of it.
Yes, you can deploy an agent. It could be agent or agentless. Agent means you deploy an agent to all assets, i.e., in this case, Windows, Mac, Linux, or even now Chromebook that we just rolled out. Or you can put it out as a probe, which means deploy it on a specific machine, and then that same piece of software can then become a probe that you can set it up to do discovery scans, importing, all the scans you do. Obviously, they take a lot longer. And then there's caveats if their AD is your AD joined or Entra ID joined, then connectivity becomes a problem. So then that's why we did the agent based, because it just becomes very easy. There's no credentials, and they can be anywhere in the world, and you can scan them.
Fair. All right. So it's multi-tenanted, it's endpoint driven. You give them 35 days free if they need to use it in like free customer prospecting mode.
Yep.
Is there an agreement? Is it month to month? How does it?
It's month to month. We don't do long-term agreements. It's month to month with a 30-day out. Plain and simple. So they're not tied into any contract.
MSPs, listen. You wish that was every vendor you're dealing with. Be honest.
Yeah. And that's how we want to do it. We want to make sure it's easy for the customer, and then they can manage their licensing. They can log in and see exactly how much they've utilized, and then it's based on consumption, either pay by credit card or ACH or whatever they want to do.
I like it. Yep. I like it. So you said one thing in there, so I was just looking at your list, right? So they said vulnerability scan, the security baseline, dark web monitoring. I know there's a lot of products out there, but it's in there.
Yep.
Risk monetization, risk mitigation, scorecard. That's your credit score, right?
Yep.
Cyber risk assessment reporting, the cybersecurity compliance.
Yep.
Let's, for 2 seconds, you mentioned earlier in the call, the podcast, pen testing, which quite frankly, I mean, I feel like the hot dog cart on the corner in New York City says too.
Yeah.
What's legitimate in that category? And maybe you don't do it, but like everybody seems to be offering it. But like, what counts and what doesn't count here?
Yeah. So there's always this misconception of what is pen testing, right? Some people think it's just vulnerability assessments, the whole 9 yards, right? So there's two sides to it. For us, from the internal pen testing standpoint, right? If you look at the pen testing methodology, it's a discovery, enumeration, vulnerability mapping, exploitation, right? So internally, we focus on the first three: discovery, enumeration, vulnerability mapping, and then you can export that out. Now, externally, we look at web applications. So we actually then take advantage of saying, okay, we've enumerated the web app. We've discovered the web app, basically put in the URL. We've enumerated it, discovered potential insertion points. Now we're going to tell you cross-site scripting, SQL injection, all that kind of stuff, which is a requirement for certain regulations to have that ongoing with external facing websites, because that's the first protocol that your clients or their clients are connecting to, and you do not want that to be compromised. And even if it's housing potential information, especially with CCPA, California Consumer Protection Act, and GDPR for European, and even some US companies are adopting that. You need to make sure it's doing that. So that's the part of pen testing that we go through the full gamut of discovery, enumeration, vulnerability mapping, exploitation. But everything else is the first three of that whole exploitation, vulnerability, or pen testing methodology.
Okay.
So there's lots of that right there.
There's a lot there. I know we only had so much time, but like I love all these pen testing, this, that, human being. And I'm just like, why is this category so not consistent, right? Everybody just uses it's just like any other technology. They all market something, and you're just like, is that the same thing as that? Like, it sounds like
it is, to the point, like, say, for example, we do have some of the security firms that use our platform for web application pen testing. So what they do is they do that as what they call surface check, right? Now, the customer, and they'll charge them a certain amount of money for that. If they want to go into full red team, which means they'll take the results of that scan and then really deep dive into the customer if they require it for one reason or another, they'll have that. So they'll do that maybe once or twice a year, that really deep dive. But every other point they'll use Cyrisma, that kind of like, all right, surface check, because basically the hackers out there are doing surface checks until they designate and find out there's a potential issue. Then they will kind of keep scratching at it, scratching at it, scratching at it at a pace that's basically doesn't get identified. So we're trying to do that from an external standpoint.
Mm.
Internal is where you start getting this, oh, V pen test and this pen test and automation and all this kind of stuff. What we want to do is bring you the information that you can extract out and put it wherever you want that from a pen test standpoint internally, whether that's Metasploit, whether that's this, whether it's that tool, whatever. Take the information that we've already discovered for you with the vulnerability mapping and then have at it from an exploitation standpoint, because then you can use a tool internally that's a lot more robust than what we would actually do. But externally, from a website standpoint, we have that built in. And then from the MSP standpoint, it's point and click. Just put the URL, click on schedule, and off it goes. And then within a period of time, it comes back and give you results that you can print out and actually provide a report to their dev people to say, here's the areas we fixed, areas that are issues. Here's where the location of those potential problems are. Go ahead and fix them.
Okay. So like, take whatever you want away from this, guys, when you're watching this. But here's one thing I took away. I don't need you to be a security expert.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know you're not, most likely, or you don't have that person or capability inside your company, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
what this does is it tries to level you up, right? Because the security
Yep.
people built it, but
Yep.
for the MSP to not have to like understand all the nooks and crannies. But here's the check. What happens when they don't understand what the portal's telling them? Is there like, do you guys help them with what the platform tells them to do, or how does
Mm-hmm.
that?
So yes, we do. We have a what we call our technical onboarding, right, to educate the engineers of how to utilize the platform, but then also to how to digest and look at those results, right, and say what's the next steps. But we also do it from a sales perspective, how to understand the value prop of a solution like this to sell to your existing customers or when you're going to the net new customer, because so they'll tell you they don't know how to sell cybersecurity, right? Because it's not being a kind of a go-to for them. It's their mainstay of bread and butter is literally, I want to go in, manage the full IT. That's basically it, right? Security's after the fact. And that's what we try to do is we have a partner portal which educates them on how to use the platform, the certifications not only for the salespeople, but also for the technical people. But we're really building that rapport, because what we want to do is selfishly, as being, as a vendor, is that the more you bring into our platform, the more revenue we generate. But we want it to be a successful goal that you also generate additional revenue, right? Because if you built enough margin into your sales, you can roll it in and show value add. But if you haven't, people ask the question. And in the meeting that you had last week, one of the questions was, how much do I sell? What's the price I sell per endpoint, right? And that's a key thing, because I know exactly from an availability standpoint, from a cybersecurity standpoint, it's all over the place. But we've seen from our partners that do it is basically it's based your value that you think that the customer should pay on what your services you're doing. Now, if you're strictly just doing Cyrisma, just doing that, they add an additional $5 on per endpoint. If they want to add in the strategic element, we've seen partners uplift a per endpoint laptop, desktop, and server by an additional $75 per endpoint just with Cyrisma, right? And they're getting that. They're getting that. They're closing those deals, right? So we're trying to say, how do you get to that point? And they're educating them and saying, you're making it a lot harder than what it really is. If you show the value of the platform itself by giving that little taste and showing them what you've done and being aware that, yes, you may not be 100% perfect, but now you want to be on that track to be better because you want to enhance their security. This is where you need to do. And it can actually, it's like the field of dreams, right? You build it, they shall come. And that's what you're doing is you're building it and being aware of it. And now you can actually start dictating your value as an add-on to the service. And when it comes to renewal, I'll just put an example. One of the partners was selling per laptop, desktop, and server was $275 per month, additional.
Oh,
right?
Additional.
Yes.
I love that.
So, and he was able to, and again, because it's cheaper for them. It's like a security office in a box, right? You bring it to the table tool sets. You bring the table some additional leadership, because they are going to look at you being a subject matter expert, because that's why they're paying you. But then now you show them the value over a period of time for renewal. You can say, oh, by the way, we're going to increase your monthly, because it's now we're bringing in some additional staff or whatever, and now you're creating that additional margin, as well as enhancing their security posture, because it'll be cheaper for them to pay you than it would be to go out and buy a CISO and a team to be able to provide services for them, or even go out and do an assessment. Is showing that depending on the size, average assessments could be $20,000-$30,000 minimum. There could be more depending on what you're doing.
It's very interesting.
Yep.
So where do people go and find out more information, talk to someone, see what it does, all that jazz?
Yeah, just go to our website, www.cyrisma.com. There's information directly on there, and then just click on book a demo, and that goes directly through to our sales engineering team, gets you on there. We do a white glove service. We don't just set you up in a trial and off you go and here you go. We actually want to walk you through the journey, because it's successful for us and as well as for you to be able to get up and running in less than an hour on any client, because that's how quickly you can deploy Cyrisma and start collecting data in less than an hour.
So just in case you're listening to the audio version of this, C Charlie YRISMA, right? So
yep. And actually it's an acronym.
Okay,
so,
what is it?
Cyber Risk Management. RIS for risk, MA for management.
Oh, I got it. I don't think I would have figured that out unless you said it.
Yeah. So that's why it's capitalized. So everybody's like, why is everything all capitalized? Because it's an acronym. Oh, like, what is it? But yeah, Cyrisma. Yeah.
Got it. I love the story, man. I'm glad that you figured out that you decided not to do with people from New York City, but don't be offended. That's just guys are tough cookie. Tough cookie. It's all good. I'm from Philly area. We're tough cookies too. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Liam, thank you. Thank you for joining. And thank you for coming last week to get Community Minds. Hopefully,
it was good.
I know it was a different format, different style event.
Yep.
I enjoyed that.
That was good. It was good to listen to some of the panels. It was very good to see some of the people up there. And some of the panelists actually are users of our platform.
There's some smart people on there.
Yes,
and
like
the fact that they were willing to share. That's what we want, right? Because this whole New York state of mind, where everybody's like competing with each other, cats, moat, alligators.
Yeah.
Let's try and pull that back a little bit. Let's talk about what works and what doesn't. So thank you for being a part of that. We really did like that format. And you know what? The more people share, the more we all learn. And so rise all the boats kind of thing.
Yep.
So I'm sure we're going to see you at an event. Probably, we're in the gauntlet period, right? So
my next one I'm going to, for me personally, will be MSP Alert Live in Austin, Texas.
Awesome.
And then after that, that'll be the last one I will attend, but there's still others. The rest of my team will be attending.
Awesome. Well, if you're headed to Austin, make sure you grab a beer with Liam. I'll tell you more about that Gateway Computer store.
All right.
Have a good one, friend.
Right.
For everyone else,
thank you, everybody.
Thanks for joining. You'll find this on MSPinitiative.com under sessions. Keep checking in with us, and we hope we'll see you at an event between now and the end of the year. Catch you guys.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.